The U.S. and Israel have arrogantly walked into Iran's trap, and the trap is working. 400,000 Israeli troops have been mobilized, but no operational control of any of Israel's 5 fronts has been established. Israel lost between 10 and 100 tanks. Israeli casualty censorship is complete. Hezbollah and Houthis have coordinated their counterattacks according to long-established plans with Iran. Not 10 helos shot down, 10 helos evacuating KIA and WIA Israeli troops. Israel has no plans to augment U.S. ground troops in Iran as they lack the capability. April and May is the rough deadline for when U.S. and Israeli anti-missiles and drone munitions run out. This means U.S. Mideast bases in Israeli cities will be even more vulnerable than they are now. U.S.-Iran air dominance has failed. Marines and paratroopers being inserted will be highly vulnerable. Once on the ground, they will be targets of a devastating artillery, mortar, and missile fire. Then there is the problem of resupply. Airborne and assault troops hold their beach and airheads, but they cannot advance and must be relieved and resupplied within weeks. The Mossad CIA plan to have the Iranian people rise up, be the boots on the ground, and use Starlinks has failed completely due to Mossad's obsession with murder. Murdering Gaza women and children, murdering Iran's spiritual leaders, their diplomats, and their families has galvanized Iranian resistance. Iranians may not like the ruling theocracy, but they've had their fill of U.S. and Israeli murder of their fellow Iranians. Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security has arrested dozens of Iranian Mossad and CIA agents. They are being detained or executed. The Western propaganda of Iran mowing down thousands of protesters is just that. The protesters are actually Israeli, sick of bomb shelters. The protesters are actually Israelis, sick of bomb shelters and being bombed. All Netanyahu appearances have been debunked as fake. He is either dead, in coma, or hiding. Trump constantly contradicts himself, often in the same press conference. Israel and America's strategy is non-existent. Iran has been preparing theirs for 40 years. And while suffering terrible losses, are executing their attrition and economic warfare strategy as planned. China and Russia are providing Iran real-time, space-based ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. China and Russia have given Iran the highest ground. Iran's asymmetrical warfare is in a coordinated lockstep with not just Hezbollah and the Houthis, but superpowers Russia and China. The U.S. and Israel have arrogantly walked right into Iran's trap, and the trap is working. The failing and fallen American Republic turned empire is failing faster than ever. Israel is in dire straits, and yes, it starts to look biblical. There are repeated biblical warnings that when we get to the eschatological season known as the last days, the entire world will turn against the nation of Israel. In Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, it becomes clear that no nation comes to Israel's defense when the war of Gog and Magog begins in the last days. That's in Ezekiel 38:16. In Zechariah, we find another Old Testament example of all nations turning against Israel in the end times, in Zechariah 12:2-3. Behold, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes reeling to all the peoples around. When the siege is against Jerusalem, it will also be against Judah. It will come about in that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. The Apostle John, who wrote the book of Revelation, repeatedly prophesied all nations would turn against Israel at the end of days. In Revelation chapter 12, John writes that one day Satan will be thrown down to earth, where he deceives the whole world to turn against Israel and the Jewish people and to persecute them terribly. Another example is found in Revelation 16. There, the apostle writes, the demonic forces in the spirit world will gather together the kings of the whole world for a terrible and apocalyptic war against Israel during the last days. In that war, all the military forces of the world will converge in the place in which Hebrew is called Har Megiddo, located in the Jezreel Valley in northern Israel, which in English is called famously Armageddon. The text is clear that God will supernaturally destroy and judge all of these enemies of Israel. Before he does so, God will sovereignly allow the world to turn against Israel en masse. Has we arrived at the prophetic point in history in which the entire world is turning against Israel and the Jewish people? Not yet, but that's definitely where we are treading. What Trump does next makes all the difference. Welcome, I'm Jeff Prather, and this is a special Prather Point. And that is the title, is Iran Wins, Israel Loses, America Deploys. We're going to cover today what Trump did not announce in his Wednesday night address to the nation. Trump preaches the resurrection. Fake Christians call Trump a messiah. And then we have a very special guest, ex-CIA child rescuer, former U.S. Marine Corps Captain BAZZLE Baz guests. So what Trump did not announce last night in his official address to the nation was an invasion of Kharg Island or Iran. By not addressing that, he may be taking that off the table, which we should hope he does, because as I've said and many other military experts have said, it will not work. But he did not mention that at all. Of course, all the troops are deployed. Actions reveal motives, but he did not say that. He also said that the United States does not need to open the Strait of Hormuz, which means they cannot. Finally, it looks like he's figured that out. Military planners have gotten through to him. And he was telling his audience that they needed to open it. So Europe can't open it. NATO doesn't have the power to open it. The only people that really have the power to do it is China. And it's not military, because China's naval capacity is weak. Their aircraft carriers are always catching fire. And now it looks like aircraft carriers are no longer even important anymore. That is what the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranian war, has shown. The age of the aircraft carrier, the projection of nation state power by naval air power is over. But it is an economic power because China uses so much energy and can store so much energy. Because Iran is not primarily a military power, but an economic power, because it controls the 25-mile wide, 100-mile long Strait of Hormuz. And it has to be controlled. So Trump is saying that that has to be opened, and we're not going to do it, which seems to also back up, hopefully, that we are not going to deploy our troops. Because I've said repeatedly, this would be a disaster. And simply taking Kharg or taking the coastline to still not open the Strait of Hormuz. There's not a military answer to this clearly. So what Trump did not say Wednesday night is much more significant than what he said. He also said that we would be done in a couple of weeks. So that is very good news. Of course, this may be a deception plan as well, but I am hopeful because I am always faith-filled. So that is very important. And if you took nothing else away from what he said, that's what you should, I think, take away. It's not what he said, it's what he did not say. No mention of ground troops, no mention of invasion. What you would have expected him to do was to announce the invasion was underway. So on this Passion Thursday, that is very good news. And I may have the reason why the change. It may have been a last-minute change from announcing the Iranian invasion of ground troops to the de-escalation, hopefully. So this is breaking. Iran has received 500 Hwasong 18 or 18 ICBM missiles from North Korea. The most consequential weapons transfer in modern history just happened, and the West missed it entirely. Iran has received 500 Hwasong 18 ICBMs from North Korea. Road mobile, they're not fixed, solid fuel, they can launch immediately, maneuvering re-entry vehicles that defeat every defense system in the region. Solid fuel means no launch signature. Iron Dome is now irrelevant. THAAD is overwhelmed. Every calculation has changed overnight. The covert smuggling operation went over land by Chinese and Iran land routes, bypassing U.S. naval blockades. These missiles can not only reach Israel, but Europe and the continental United States. The Hwasong 1-8 guidance is by stellar navigation, not GPS. Put simply, this means that conventional U.S. electronic jamming warfare is made irrelevant. These intercontinental ballistic missiles are maneuverable upon re-entry. 500 Hwasong versus 400 U.S. Minuteman. You do the math. This is a nuclear delivery vehicle. Thus, every Hwasong launch would need to be treated as a potential nuclear launch. To be very clear, the intelligence information analysis that Iran has nuclear delivery vehicles does not mean Iran has a nuclear weapon. My own intelligence information analysis agrees with that. So does DNI Gabbard's. So does my old agency, the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. But this may be why Trump did not announce an Iran invasion Wednesday night. And so that is very significant, and that may be the change. So there's a lot happening. Really, the American empire is ending. The republic has fallen. The empire is failing. And this is end of empire. This is a reshuffling of power via military and economic regions, because the U.S. can no longer control and open the Strait of Hormuz by force. Iran doesn't. Trump inadvertently admitted all of that. And that's not a bad thing. And again, this looks like it is following biblical revelation, where the lady is carried by the wings of eagle off into the wilderness. I believe that's the United States. And we go back to more the way we were. And so I've often been very critical of President Trump lately. And some of the ever-Trumpers are very upset by that. So I want to give credit where credit due. Credit is due. There was a prayer meeting at the White House. And the prayers are not very Christian. You know, Hegseth saying, wants God to break the teeth of the enemy. Paula White is certainly, in my estimation, not a true Christian, but saying she was praying for satanic abortions, and comparing Trump she was comparing Trump to Yeshua, to Jesus, saying that he was betrayed, arrested, and falsely accused, and that Trump rose like Yeshua, defeated death, and will defeat all his enemies. I think that's quite heresy. Trump is just a man. He is not a Messiah, although there are cultists who think he is. But Trump did preach the gospel, and I want to give him credit where it is due. And he said this on Good Friday: the Son of God was nailed to the cross, crucified, and died for all of us. It was a day of darkness, but it wasn't the end. By any means, it was not the end. On Easter Sunday, the stone was rolled away, and the grave was empty. Christians everywhere rejoiced, and we continue to rejoice. Easter is one of the incredible days. It was the miracle in all history, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It was the great miracle, I guess, right? Yes, President Trump, it is the greatest miracle. He told his followers, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Because of the events of Holy Week 20 centuries ago, people from every nation, language, and background can take on any difficulty, press through any trial, and endure any hardship. With Christ, not one thing can separate humanity from the powers of God's everlasting love. Amen on that. Of course, I still say that Trump is our first Jewish president. I put out a Substack on that, did a sermon on that. Mark Levin later came out and confirmed that. But Trump preaching the gospel is great. Very similar to if you celebrated Pesach, Passover last night, and you were using the Haggadah, the handbook for the Seder, the order of Passover, you would see Rabbi Gamaliel in there. And Rabbi Gamaliel was one of the most famous rabbis who actually stood up for Paul, because St. Paul, had been his apprentice. And what Gamaliel says about Paul is, hey, if this Christian stuff is real, of God, it will last. And if it isn't, it will fade, because we've seen false messiahs before. So Gamaliel may have been one of the first closet Christians as well. So That's really important. Give me some of that. Says Stellar Nav Tech is not new. First F-111s were equipped with Starlight Nav capability. That's early 60s tech. Jeffrey, do you think the assassination on Trump's life was faked? Yes, I think it was set. I think it was set up totally. I think the government was definitely in on it. I've worked extensively with the FBI, Secret Service. Nobody's that incompetent. The way they performed, the way they kept him on the X was purposeful. Of course, posing for the cameras. Again, I think it was the deep state working to blame Iran. The intelligence that Iran was responsible for it, and Crooks, this kid was somehow attached to Iran, was really all part of this whole deep state false flag about Iran. Iran's got its sins and crimes, but that isn't one of them. Lockheed had R2-D2 navigation dome behind the recon pilot on an SR-71. Okay, don't know about that. But anyway, lots of important things happening here. See your comments on X. See your comments on Rumble. They also send Mark Levin and Steve Bannon as the first boots on the ground. That's very true. Again, yeah, Steve Bannon wanted to work with Epstein after he was convicted of child pedophilia. And, you know, he's not a pleasant person in private, and how you act in private is really the measure of your character. But anyway, those are the big events happening. I want to get to my special guest. And as you know, I am no big fan of the CIA, even though I'm a soldier. Pretty fan of the Marine Corps. But my special guest today is BAZZLE Baz. He's a former Marine Corps captain. He is ex-CIA, and he is a child rescuer. And he has quite a resume. And I think you'll see when we talk to him why he is an exception. There's a lot of things we share in common. And I'm really looking forward to talking to him, and been trying to get him for quite some time. So, BAZZLE, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Good. Excellent. Great. Good to be with you. Thank you so much.
So if I'm correct, I think your father recently passed. Is that right?
He did. He passed July 15th, 2025, 1,500 hours. Former SF 8th group guy. Everything. Lived more than most men would in 3 lifetimes. And I grew up with my own personal hero being my dad, and probably one of the greatest men of God, and probably one of the greatest patriots in this nation. He's greatly missed every day. But I'll see him again when God calls me home. So yeah, I did.
Amen. Well, my father just recently, we have a lot in common, I think. My father just recently passed. He's a World War II sailor, fought the Japanese, and took me to Japanese dojo later on. So my dad just passed last year too. So you certainly have my prayers and condolences. Thanks. And I've been thinking about that since we've been talking. I know you've been really busy, so thanks for making time.
You are. Thank you. You're welcome.
So I wanted to get into first your background, because your name is so unusual. And so is it a Druze, a Middle Eastern background name? Is that?
It is. My grandfather came here to the U.S. in 1914, became a U.S. citizen legally, and married my grandmother, who was Waccamaw. She was Native American. They had 12 kids. They settled in a place called Georgetown, South Carolina, which, as you know, is historically an old American Revolution town, and raised them. And I ended up being one of, oh my gosh, maybe 20 some grandkids, being the oldest, one of the oldest of the grandkids. So yeah, and then prior to that, the family history dates back to about, on my grandfather's side, about 1160. Interesting enough, at a place called Fort Buford, Lebanon, where the Crusades were fought, where in that time, the family with the name Baz actually split up. well, not the family, excuse me, the Druze community split. Half went with Saladin and the others went with the Crusaders. And I think our side went with the Crusaders because if you study the name, it dates back to the marriage between Isaiah and a prophetess who bore a child with the name of Boz. And so I had heard that handed down over history, but I really couldn't put the pieces together until I had some people much more theologically based open the scriptures to me and say, hey, guess what? This is where your family comes from. So all those stories that my grandfather spoke of going back in history made a little bit more sense. And so, yeah, that's where it comes from. It's I think I'm the only BAZZLE Boz probably in the world, to be honest with you. So with a unique name comes a unique upbringing and a whole family of warfighters that date back a long way, and great patriots. On my mother's side, the Lamberts came in from Scotland, settled here in America, and fought in the American Revolution. So I've got some pretty good DNA floating around in there.
That's really cool. And I know we'll tie this in a little bit, the significance of your spiritual background and commitment. And by the way, I was in 7th Special Forces Group, spent a lot of time in Panama all over. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah, Dad was part of that small group of guys that went down and picked up Che Guevara down in Bolivia, along with the CIA way back in the day. Yeah. I didn't know that until many, many years later. He never spoke of it. He was a very quiet professional, and I think most of the things that I learned about him came from other people telling me. While I would curiously look at 4 bronze stars and silver stars and all that stuff, and asking, hey, what'd you do? Where'd this come from? And he'd just say, just doing my job. That's it. So everything a lot of things I found out about my dad's military history came from people that bumped into me later, even during my days in the CIA. And guys would walk up and go, hey, I served with your dad at the La Esperanza sugar mill before we got Che. Or, hey, I served with your dad in Laos and Vietnam. And I'm like, I don't think so. I said, my dad was an Army guy, and they're like, oh, yeah, right. You don't know much about your dad, do you? So it was actually an honor, I think, to learn it from other people than to hear my dad ever brag about it, because he was never that type of person. And he did extraordinary things. So I will honor him with the way I live my life and the stories I tell about him and my mother and my ancestors to those that I run into from time to time.
That's so funny because I'm adopted. I came out of an orphanage. I was a product of rape, but my wife found my birth mom, and my birth mom turned out to be a State Department official and had served in Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam and Somalia, and was close with a lot of the SF and MACSOG stuff. So it's just kind of amazing, what your roots really reveal. But I guess like you, like me, we wanted to emulate our dads. And so you were accepted to all the academies, but you chose the Citadel. And I got to say, I'm an ROTC guy. I'm no fan of ring knockers for the most part, but of all the academies, the Citadel is the real deal as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I was very glad to be able to get accepted at the Citadel. It is, in my, of course, I'm prejudiced. It's the finest school you could go to in America, to be honest with you. At least it was when I was there. I go back from time to time and speak there, and it's still pretty much got its roots where it needs to be. There are some changes, some things that I think, as all alumni do, that could be better or be like it was in the old Corps, tougher, so to speak. But it is what it is right now, and I think they're producing some good citizens out of the school. And it's not as nearly as DEI'd as Annapolis and West Point, I would say, for sure. Yeah. And, its history is pretty unique too. I mean, and you probably know this, that the first shots of the Civil War were fired by Citadel cadets on the Star of the West trying to resupply Fort Sumter. So a bunch of crazy cadets, I'll tell you, but I love the school and I love what it stands for. And it was it was a pleasure going and graduating from there.
Very cool. And so then you chose to go into the Marine Corps, and you went to OCS from there.
Yeah.
Is that normal? You have to go through OCS?
Yeah, you know what's interesting is, excuse me, I was supposed to go to PLC my junior year, but I was on the Citadel soccer team, and we had an opportunity to go over to Holland and train and be around the national Dutch team. And it was just my goal had always been to be a professional soccer player, even though it wasn't growing that fast in America. But that was exactly where my heart was. And so I couldn't pass up that chance. So I went to the ROCT instructors and I said, look, I got to go do this trip. I have to. How can you arrange this so I can, fulfill my contract? And they said, well, it goes, here's the deal. You can go when you graduate, you're going to go to a thing called Bulldog. And Bulldog's going to be, I can't even remember now, like 9 weeks. But here's the downside. If you fail Bulldog, and it was kind of the sped up version of OCS. If you fail Bulldog, you have to go into the Marine Corps as Lance Corporal, and we'll send you to PI, to Parris Island. So it was like, okay, I can handle that, and I did go, did well, and got out and started my Marine Corps career up until about 1985, and I had a small, I don't want to call it a job, but I was helping head up with a committee of about 4 people, the Marine Corps' first counterterrorism program. We had been hit in Beirut, and as you probably recall, Jeff, we lost 222 or 223 warfighters, Marine Corps and Navy and a few other people. And so that became a new direction for the Marine Corps and something a little bit outside of guerrilla warfare. And so right after that, the CIA came looking, and it was a really, really interesting story. I got a call. I got a little sticky on my desk that said, go down and see Colonel, and I won't even mention his name right now, but I go see Colonel so-and-so at this building. And in the Marine Corps, it's spit and polish. I mean, we keep our grass cut with scissors, basically. I mean, that's just the Marine Corps way. Attention to detail, nothing short. We don't slack. And I went down to this building, and the weeds were all grown up, and the building needed painting. And I thought, I'm probably not at the right place. And I knocked on the door anyway. And a civilian lady opened the door, and she said, Captain Baz, we've been expecting you. And the colonel is in his office. So I go in to this rundown building, and inside, Jeff, it's spit and polish. I mean, it's like something out of a lawyer's office. It's beautiful. And I knock on the door, excuse me, and I'm staring at the back of a leather chair, high-rise leather chair, on a big wooden desk and bookcases. I mean, it was an impressive office. And I'm watching this trail of smoke, cigar smoke, and Captain Bob's reporting his order, sir, and he swivels around, and I'm staring at this steel-jawed, blue-eyed Marine of a Marine, and he takes the fire stick out of his mouth and puts it down and says, son, I understand the CIA's been in touch with you. Now, I hadn't told anybody. I had met them 2 weeks earlier at the National War College during a counterterrorism symposium, and they had approached me, and I was just trying to figure out how he knows. And so I didn't really say anything, Jeff. And he says, well, he goes, let me cut to the chase. That's what he said. He goes, you remember Beirut, Lebanon, 19 something something. I think he said 70s. He goes, naval attaché is crossing the street, coming out of the Hilton Hotel. 4 terrorists drive by in a car and gun him down in the street. And I go, yes, sir, I do remember that. He goes, yes, but did you hear the rest of the story, son? And I said, no, sir. He goes, that naval attaché opened his briefcase. He pulled out an Uzi. He locked and loaded. And when they came back to kill him, he killed all of those SOBs. That was his word. And he goes, and then he walked into the Hilton Hotel and said, get me a doctor. And they got him a doctor. And he goes, and that's why I stay at all the Hilton hotels for the rest of my life. He goes, I was that naval attaché and I was working for the CIA, and I'm here to ask you, do you want to join the CIA?
Wow.
I mean, it was like this amazing story. I mean, he told it so well. And I was everything I could do not to have a big smile on my face. And I was just quiet. And he looked at me, and I mean, like those piercing eyes. And he says, I'll tell you what. He goes, you think about that and you get back in touch with me. And so as I was leaving, I opened the door and I turned around and I said, sir, let me ask you a question. If you were me, what would you do? And he picks up the fire stick again. He swivels back around. And now I'm looking at the same picture that I had when I came in, the top of his head, the trail of cigar smoke. And I hear him say, why, boy, I'd join the CIA if I were you. And so a week later, I found myself at the agency with Ground Branch, Special Operations, Special Activities Service, surrounded by some amazing legends that came out of your field, came from Delta, came from, all over the place. And I was just, I was in probably the most righteous learning environment for special operations that I could have ever hoped for, to be honest with you. These men had been tested under time and under combat. They were quiet professionals, but they had the look that could kill you. And I spent probably 10 years after that in special operations, Ground Branch and Maritime. Went to the farm, became a case officer as well, and then
so you were a case officer, not a tactical agent. Well, that was before tactical agent handlers, I guess.
What's that, Jeff?
You were a case officer, not a tactical agent handler. That's before.
No. What happened is I became a paramilitary case officer. What was happening is Ground Branch were sending their people to the farm, because what would happen is your average case officer, and you already know this, they're getting hired out of Dartmouth or Harvard or someplace, but they don't have a combat experience.
Right.
So when you had something like the war in Angola with Jonas Savimbi against the Cubans, you're not going to get some skinny, broken up little Harvard grad to go hang out in the bush. You're going to have to and collect intel. Or Kosovo or Iran-Contra. These are places where you still had to have, HUMAT, but you needed people that had combat experience as well. And so the value of Ground Branch and Maritime and Air Branch, of course, which, as you know, came out of the Historical Air America group, it was critical, and it became even more critical over time. So now I think it's pretty much common, from what I understand from the discussions I have with people, that a lot of our military or former military kind of fall into that same slot where they become collectors of HUMAT, and they have good combat experience. The world's just become a little bit more dangerous now. So that was it. And then in 93, I was in Mogadishu, Somalia. I had an attachment of some center spike guys, great guys. And
I was in Foreign Operations Group, which was the predecessor to Foreign.
There you go. You know those guys. Yeah, you guys change your names all the time. I don't know why, but they were fantastic. And on a certain day, we collectively decided to rescue a couple of little girls that were not indigenous. They were in blue jeans and sunglasses and green T-shirts, and they had been left behind or abandoned by, from what I recall, their father, who was an Italian engineer or military guy, who had, I think, abandoned them when the war got hot. And anyway, we rescued them, got them to some safety. And then when I got back to the United States, it was the first time in my life I ever really stopped to say, well, what happens to children? Because interesting is, while I was there, I remember on the top of my safe house saying, God, why aren't you doing something about this? All the death and the kids, and mostly the kids. And God was really clear, Jeff. He said, I did. He goes, I created you. And
so I got to stop there, because I had this experience too. I had a personal revelation where I heard the voice. I didn't hear it. I saw it. It said, I love you. This is right. Work harder. Have faith. It changed everything for me. I found the chaplaincy. When I saw this, I knew I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the event that changed your entire life.
It did. Yeah, it was an audible voice. It brought me to my knees. The omnipotence and the power of God is not to be underestimated when He steps up to the plate. And it doesn't matter if it's real to anybody else. It was real to me. And I know the power of the Holy Spirit, and I know how it can shake the world. It is the same power that split the Red Sea for Moses. It is the same power that Jesus used to bring Lazarus back to life. It is the same God. And God, the interesting thing is that, and I know this, God doesn't need people's belief or their disbelief in order to exist. I've yet to see any human being that when God calls them home, they go, no, I've decided I'm not going. No, you go, because He who created the earth and the universe, He created us as well, and He has power. So when people don't believe, they're just foolish. They're just foolish. So for me, it did. It was, I turned around to see if it was somebody else that had said that, and there was nobody else there. And so it
So
did
what was
change.
the message again you got?
I asked God, I said, why aren't you doing something about all this? You know, like particularly kids in the middle of all this. And God said, I did. I created you. That was it.
Wow.
And I tell people that same thing. And I don't necessarily God meant me as much as He meant I created all of you. When you're looking for an answer of why I'm not doing something about this, I am doing something about it. I put you there as my hands and feet. You need to do something about it. So
that's when everything changed for you. That's when all the skills and background that you'd been developing, you suddenly had a purpose for.
Yeah, I came to understand better why I had learned as much as I'd learned along the journey. There was something bigger than overthrowing small governments. It's not that wasn't fun. I mean, it was all that, the whole world of espionage is crazy fun, particularly if you like living on the edge a little bit. But it did change for me. And I took a look at what was happening in America. And we had about 250,000 kids missing at that time. And when I asked around law enforcement about the situation, most of them responded with, well, they're just runaways, you know. And we had a lot of law enforcement that weren't trained in child sex trafficking. Excuse me. Didn't know anything about child pornography, organ harvesting, you know, child sex trafficking. And so I just was called, you know, literally. It's a difference between wanting to do something cool and being called. When you're called by God to do something, you got to do it. And so I did. And on all of my holidays and all my times off, unbeknownst to the CIA, from 93 to 96, I went out and rescued a kid. And then by 96, I realized that the battlefront wasn't overseas anymore for me. It was here in my own country. It was in my own backyard. And that the future of the Republic depended on investing in our children, which I believe now we live in such a selfish society. This is one of the reasons we have so many kids that are in so much trouble, because parents think more about themselves than they do their family, or they don't feel they're obligated to raise up. Or even our government, to some extent, has children on a priority. Now, not all the government, because there are some great things being pushed, and 47 did one of them when he, you know, shut down the Department of Education and turned it over to the states to say, here, you know, you can pray, you can salute the flag, you can teach American history again. So I was happy to see that stuff moving in the right direction. But before that, kids were being left behind, and to some degree, they still are left behind. We had 2 rescues by alumni from our art course this week, 2 different places in America. And in both cases, I think it's safe to say that when I look at what caused the problem in the first place, it's parents not paying attention to their kids.
Yes, especially fathers. Fatherless. Not
A
being,
lot to be said for fathers. You're correct.
Father wounds are big responsibility. Yeah. I got to ask you, did you know Billy Waugh?
I knew Billy. Yes.
Wow. Of course, anybody in SF knows who Billy is. So
I did know Billy. There were people that served with him. Billy and I didn't have a chance to be out in the field together. We were always just passing each other. I was coming landing, or he was coming out, or that way. But there were other guys like Rick Prado and a
oh
lot of
yeah.
other people that, excuse me, knew Billy really well. And yeah, so
Here's
Billy,
another question for you. So
yeah.
I went through special operations technique school at Mott Lake in '88, which was blue lights course and fifth group, and they had I knew some guys, some Delta guys who were corporate training unlimited. They were doing child rescue. Did you work with CTU at all, or know of
No,
them?
did not. In fact, I didn't even know they existed. You
Okay.
know, things like you mentioned blue light. The first time I really heard about blue light was from Ron Franklin, former Sergeant Major Delta, and other people and Tim Casey and those guys that came out of blue light. And of course, like I said, you guys are always changing your names, so
Yeah.
it's always evolving to something else. But I did not. The closest I ever came to in knowing about the military being involved in child rescue actually has been most recently. I have an opportunity to address the Department of War at the Pentagon Auditorium in July on this very issue, and that is the military's involvement in preventing child sex trafficking. So the Trafficking in Persons Office, some great ladies there that run that, they've arranged this, and I think for good reasons, because our military, even though there's a posse comitatus, and I know we can't operate necessarily in the U.S., what the military is designed to do, among many things, is to protect its citizens from external forces, and that's written, that's in ink. And so when you look at the cartel that's trafficking children, when you look at other people, those are external forces that are damaging U.S. citizens. So the military could and should be involved, in my opinion, in going after those people to shut that industry down. When it comes to everything, drugs, weapons, terrorism, whatever. And I'm happy to hear that that there was at least someone like what you're speaking about that was involved in that earlier on when I was unaware of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I call the dark economy is drugs, weapons, and people run by the deep state or the international cabal. But yeah, they would usually it was an American naive woman who'd married a Middle Eastern guy. The guy takes the kid over to the Middle East, and they would take the mom over there. They'd stop the school bus, no guns. They'd throw money at the bus driver, throw the keys into the desert, point the kid to the mom. And there's no guns or violence, very low key, very typical of Delta, not firing
Yeah.
a shot stuff.
Yeah, we don't. Even though many of us are authorized to carry, I think the only operation we've ever actually kitted up for outside of the country was when we were going against ISIS to help Christian kids. And that was kind of, we don't talk about that too much. Even though we have weapons, most of our operations are run with no weapons at all. We look for windows of opportunity. We use a lot of that tradecraft that we learned at the agency, and a lot of things we combine it with what we learned in our military skill set. And when we have that opportunity, most of the time the perpetrators never even know the kid's gone. We get the kid and we go. We don't spend very much time arresting pedophiles or perpetrators. That's not in our swim lane. We don't want to put the energy on it. We'll turn it over to law enforcement. And if we were deputized to do that, of course we would. But, our main objective is get the kid, get boots on the ground, and get the kid home safe back to its custodial guardians.
No, that's excellent, because that's always the problem with intelligence trying to do law enforcement is then you got to reveal sources and methods, and that doesn't work for court. I learned that in the counter drug days when I was dual credentials, DEA special agent and DIA intelligence officer. It just didn't work. So it sounds like you've stayed mostly true to your special operations and intelligence background. But I can see the serendipity of your background all coming together. And I guess a lot of your guys are volunteer.
They are all of them volunteers. Nobody has received a paycheck in 34 years. We all do something else to pay our mortgage. And that allows me to bring the right people on board. It tells me where their heart is. We do cover operational expenses, but that could change for us one day. Maybe someone will step up to the plate and say, "Hey, yeah, you know what? Let's get those guys let's let you have access to them 24/7. So we'll pay them a paycheck so they can take care of their families and stuff like that," which would be ideal. But initially, God had me set it up that way, and I didn't even question why. He just said, "This will be all volunteer, and you'll pay no salaries." And so I've just always followed that, and it has worked out well for us on many levels, Jeff. When there are other NGOs getting caught with fraudulent activities when it comes to money, we haven't ever had that problem. We have a great accounting firm that oversees all the donations, and we're totally transparent with that. And then not having paychecks, I don't have to worry about the motivation of my operators, to be honest with you. So, yeah, that's the way we are.
And so I think you've covered the genesis of it, but can you go back and talk about the ISIS operation at all? Or is that something you don't want to talk about?
Yeah, we don't talk about that stuff. In fact,
Okay.
we generally won't talk about any operation. If you look at our website, all you'll see on there, if we're going in an operation, you'll see us post something that says, "Please pray." And then once we've retrieved a child, you'll see boy safe or girl safe, and that's it. It's not our story to tell. We don't want to exploit them. Here's what a lot of people don't understand about these kids that have been traumatized. You get a 7-year-old kid that's been prostituted or raped or whatever it may be, and you bring the media into it, and now that kid has got to live with that for the rest of their life. Why do that to them? It's because, when a young girl that was raped when she was 7, and now she's 14 and she's in high school and everybody remembers her. And you know how kids are, they can be pretty rotten sometimes. So, the things what we try to do is not help them bury it, but what we try to do is respect the incident for what it is. And what it is just evil gets a hold of them. And once they're saved or they're rescued, they need to go back to a normal life and put this stuff behind them with the proper aftercare and trauma recovery care and stuff like that. So, yeah, we don't, it's really funny. And this, come on, you come out of the community every day, not every day, but a lot. I'll hear guys bragging about what they did, and most of the time they weren't even there. This is funny. We'll sit around sometimes and listen to people talk about the operations that we did, and they say they did them. And we don't even confront them. We just go, "Oh, okay, I don't remember seeing them there." So, what happens is that catches up to them sooner or later. The thing about it, though, it blemishes all the good child rescue NGOs that are doing a great job. Anytime you have somebody out there that's only in this for business, they want grant money or they're lying about their rescues, or whatever it may be. It makes donors think, well, is every organization like that? It's kind of like a church, right? You have one pastor that's a pedophile, and now the congregation and every congregation in the town is wondering if pastors aren't pedophiles at every church. That's not the case, but that's just the way people think. And so I try to encourage NGOs. I'm pretty pointed about this. I tell publicly, if you're starting a nonprofit or a non-government organization to go rescue kids, and you don't have the proper training, and you're in it for yourself, and it's easy to see if you're in it for yourself, because all you'll hear is me, and I, and on their resumes and stuff. And I want to do this because I'm looking for purpose. This is not about you. This is about them. And so we weed those people out really fast. But I publicly tell people, look, don't get in our way. If you're not in this for 100%, because trafficking doesn't stop on weekends and holidays. And if you're not willing to sacrifice yourself and your life for a kid, don't get involved with this. God doesn't need all the people. He just needs the right people. So, we work with probably now only 12 NGOs in America. That's it. Out of the hundreds and hundreds that are all popping up, Jeff, that say, oh, we rescue kids. In fact, so funny. I just had somebody, one of our employees we have a coffee company called the Highland Coffee Company, and some of the proceeds up here in Estes Park, Colorado, go to help finance our operations as well. Not a lot, but it's what we got started, because it's great coffee, by the way. So anyway, someone ran into somebody in a gym and making all kinds of claims that he's been into anti-trafficking, blah, blah, blah. He's never heard of us. We're a bunch of fakes. I mean, we've been around 34 years, right? And I looked at her and I said, don't worry about it. I said, you don't even need to confront the guy. I can tell you right now, he's not in the same lane that we're in. And he doesn't deserve my energy to try to convince him. The people who need to know, they know. And so you get a hodgepodge of people. It's kind of like stolen valor thing, which you and I are aware of. It's the same thing. It's kind of stolen valor, but it's not my ball to carry. It's God's, and we leave it in His hands all the time. I don't get my underwear tied up in a knot too many times when people start bragging about what they're doing and the operation they did, and I learned that from a lot of guys in Ground Branch who did a lot of great things, and extraordinary men of valor, and they never spoke one word of it. It'd be somebody like you and I sitting going, hey, you remember so-and-so? Oh, yeah, I was with him when we were being surrounded by blah, 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 by the Cubans, or the Russians, or whatever it may be. We would tell the story amongst ourselves, but you would never hear that person brag about it.
I think that what happened is, at least from the SF standpoint with the X-ray program, started getting a lot of younger guys, because back in my day, the average SF guy is 30, 33, married a couple. There's a maturity level, and they were all NCOs already. And the X-ray, I think it was a little more like the SEALs, but you see all that drama now. And I saw the way you very diplomatically handled Ballard and the Underground Railroad stuff. I thought that was, and I've had some of those folks on the show too, and I thought that was well said. Do you want to comment on that whole thing? Of course, the good part is that I had to speak right after Caviezel one time. Is getting the word out was, I think you were saying, was very important.
Yeah, Tim and I know each other. I've known him for many years. He came to me years ago, and before OUR was started, and asked for some guidance on how to get an organization started. I know of him and from that angle. I don't know his personal life. Most of the time when these things erupt, I pull back and sit at the 14,000 foot level and just let it unfold. I've learned that being too quick to criticize is not very wise, to be honest with you. You've given it some time, things will unfold. So I don't really know how they run their organization. We don't work with them, mainly because they've always worked outside the United States. And then, of course, they did the Sound of Freedom with Jim Caviezel. And I told people, I said, look, despite the nuts and bolts of criticism that's going on with whatever's happening with Tim and the Mormon Church and all that other stuff, I said, let's look at how God can use anything. The reality is that a film came out to say that children are being trafficked. And that's true. Now, I only have one criticism about the film, and I'm not saying anything to you that Tim and I wouldn't say to Tim. I think they shot a film that was in their lane, which was overseas, which is brilliant. The problem we're having in America is that everybody that's seen the film are thinking it just happens over there.
We're headquarters central for child trafficking.
Yeah. And so I'm hoping that someone one day will knock on the door and say, hey, let's do one about what's really happening here in America, because I think that's really important. the trafficking of children in America is far more sophisticated than it is overseas. I'll give you an example, Jeff. Overseas, if a lot of times you can pay a fixer for 20 kids that are being trafficked, and they'll parade those kids in front of you. You pay your money, and then you can have your way with a child. The gangs and the cartel here in the States, they'll parade some kids in front of you, but you have to rape a kid in front of them to make sure that, so they can make sure you're not an undercover. And then guess what? You pay them the money and they give you the kid again. So they're pretty brilliant. That makes it extremely difficult for law enforcement here because, as you know, you cannot be part of commission of a crime. You can't be complicit in that crime at all. So it makes it really touchy here in America for a lot of people that probably could do some great undercover work, but their hands are a little tied. So I'm grateful. I will tell America this, when I saw criticisms about the film, there's a reason they call it the entertainment industry, okay? Because no matter what your true to life story is, once you sign your life rights over, as probably Tim did, you don't have any control over that any longer. The studio does. And so if the studio wants you to go chase pink monkeys, that's what's going to be in the movie, because some studio head, some creative person that may not have a moral code, whatever, is going to change things around so that they can make something that's entertaining. Because if it's entertaining, then they profit from it. And so, it's probably true that there were things that were probably in the movie that may not have occurred. But again, it's a movie. It's a movie. If you didn't want it to be that way, then you shoot a documentary and you keep it true. So I wish the best for everybody always. I haven't spoken to Tim in a while. I wish the best for him and his family always. He knows that. I think his heart's in the right place. Outside of all the other criticism, I'm a man that, as I said, I just sit back and watch it unfold and hope that the bad things aren't bad and hope the good things are good and that everybody prospers. And for us, anything and everything that's done, it has to help me rescue a child. I don't care if somebody comes to me with some new technology. If they come to me with anything, I always ask them, how does this help me save a child? If it doesn't help me save a child, I don't want it and I don't need it. So we try to stay very compressed in our operations. And I know you know what that term means. And just not try to do it all because we're not designed to do it all. We just do this one thing. When law enforcement, local, federal, or state, either doesn't want to get involved or they can't handle a case any longer, or it's too dangerous for them, or there's a liability they can't mitigate because they're attorneys, we get involved and we come and we go get the kid. It's like I did a case for the FBI one time and they couldn't go to a certain country and talk to a cartel member. And I could. And so I went down and I spent 7 days in an area looking for some kids that had been kidnapped. And as a former CIA officer, that's not law enforcement. And I was not mishandled by the cartel at that time. Might be a different story now, there's a little more popularity, but, and they told me, they said, look, we know who you are. And they did. They said, you have 7 days to look for these children, but after 7 days, you have to leave. And I was like, okay, great. I don't know. The FBI said that they would not be able to go into an operation like that without having to arrest somebody or whatever, or at least the agent that asked me to go do it at that time. So, we have a little bit more flexibility as a nonprofit organization when it comes to what we can do and what we can't do.
Oh, definitely. And I wanted to ask you, so you've been very outspoken, as I have, about the Biden administration doing open trafficking of children. And I've had Tara Rhodes on the show, backing all of that up. And I wanted to get your analysis of how that has changed under the Trump administration, because It looks like there's zero for 9 months now, illegals coming in. So that I would assume has cut the flow coming in. But how has that affected the child trafficking in the United States? How is the Trump administration different in detail, in depth, from your point of view, from the open trafficking going under the Biden administration? And correct me if I'm misstating what your point of view.
No, you're fine. Well, let's start out. Let's lay the foundation first. The Biden administration was complicit in the largest child sex trafficking operation in the history of this country by a government, hands down. We were the first teams on the ground in Chattanooga, Tennessee, when the night flights were coming in, dropping UAC children off. Okay, and they weren't dropping them off for reunification centers. They're putting them on buses, and they were going to just nondescript parking lots, and children were reluctantly being handed over to people they didn't even know. So when it comes to child sex trafficking, at that time, I think Tom Homan had mentioned that they had accounted for about 500,000 UACs that were missing. I think they've claimed now they've collected 160,000. So we still have all the other ones that are still probably being trafficked. Okay, then there's the accountability issue. Who are the traffickers? Okay, MVM, Catholic Charities. They haven't been held accountable. They haven't been held accountable. So I'm kind
Hebrew Immigration Society, Lutheran, all those religious
all of those.
Yes.
So to answer your question, I think 47 has his hands full simply because there has been no accountability to those organizations, nor Biden, nor Harris, nor any of the Senate or the Congress that voted for the open border policy. Okay. So accountability is something we're lacking in this country. And until we have accountability, guess what? The trafficking of all of those children is going to continue.
That's exactly what I've been saying. And what I've said is, and I think you'll agree as a Christian, that the Border Patrol, ICE, all the guys that were doing this stuff, that were doing it before, there has never been any confession or repentance. And actually, I think it should start with Trump. But I don't know how you move forward from any of that without the Christic protocols of confession and repentance, asking for forgiveness, because next president could come in, they could go back to doing the same thing. And I think that's what you're talking about with accountability.
Well, to some degree I am. Here's the thing. In order for 47 or for us to find all those other kids, including, let's say, the 423,000 American children that were missing before that, okay, on our streets, you've got to be able to connect the dots. And the best way to connect the dots is to go criminally charge MVM, Catholic Charities, the Lutherans, all of those for what they did, get it in their files, their computers, and then look at the maps of where all the kids went. And then you can find the kids. But it's not going to happen unless they're being held accountable for something. Right now, they're not held accountable. They made billions of dollars in trafficking children into America. And as far as I know, not one of them have been held criminally charged, have not been criminally charged for those actions. If you or I were to even cross with one child illegally, we would go to prison for trafficking. And yet Biden and Harris and the administration at that time are still running around free for crimes they committed against this country. And nobody is stepping up to the plate to do anything about it. Heck, we can't even get past the Epstein files, right? Right. So that's a whole other ball of wax right there. So what is 47 doing about it? I think he's put the right people in charge. Tom Homan, I think, is doing an amazing job with his people, with TSA and ICE. And I think Kristi Noem did an incredible job as well before she ended up going someplace else. Tulsi Gabbard, I have the utmost admiration for her. However, I know she's probably always looking over her shoulder because she's probably surrounded by deep state and bad actors that want to, mess up anything she's going for. But she's primarily on top of the intelligence network there, which is what we require in the United States to even find out what's happening with trafficked children. The challenge that 47 has now is that child sex trafficking has cross-pollinated with terrorism, espionage, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking in our country. So when Biden and them opened the floodgates, it put a cancer inside of our country that we are slowly having to clean out, but it moves all over the entire republic. And when it comes to the border, yes, one of the greatest things he did was close up the border. But I just had a team down on the border this past month looking at other openings and stuff in certain areas, and it's still porous. So people can still come across, and they are coming across, and drugs are coming across, and weapons are coming across, and terrorists are coming across. I think I just heard yesterday, um, and I don't know, it wasn't the agency, I'll tell you, because the CIA is not the same CIA that I work for.
No,
It's
no,
it's
not hardly.
it in itself, that and the FBI have not cleaned house. I know that for a fact.
So yeah, I graduated from the FBI Academy 1990. I've been to the farm, and I'm friends with Ed Morales, the hero of the Miami gunfight. He did UC for me. We're both firearms instructors. The FBI and CIA of today is not the FBI and CIA of
No.
yesterday by
Yeah.
any means.
No, by any means. They are the level of corruption and left-wing socialist Marxist influence is so deep in the CIA and possibly in the FBI that I don't know why 47 isn't demanding that it gets cleaned up. And I will tell you right now, I know for a fact, because you and I both have friends in both organizations that are saying it's not being cleaned up. It's being covered up. It's not being cleaned up. It's being covered up. I had a friend of mine retired from the Bureau. And look, I'm not picking on the Bureau. My aunt and uncle worked for the Bureau. I was an adjunct professor at the Bureau, as well. But my friend, my conversations like 2 months ago, he said, I've retired from the Bureau. He goes, but I don't even want to collect my paycheck, my retirement check. And I said, well, why is that? He goes, because I just realized that I spent the last 28 years working for the largest legal crime syndicate in America. He goes, the things we did that were criminal. He goes, I don't even know where to start without having somebody come kill my family or kill me. And I looked at him, I said, and I won't mention his name. I said, look, don't feel bad. The CIA isn't the same as it used to be. We who have retired from the agency, when Obama and Brennan got a hold of it, I mean, they infiltrated that with their people 7 levels deep, and it hasn't been cleaned up yet, and it's not cleaned up. I mean, you got John Radcliffe up there, right? Look, 47, if you're listening to this, sir, you might want to take a real hard look at who you've got running who the DCI is, and I don't mind mentioning it at all. There are a number of us, like you and myself, and many of our friends who were former intelligence officers that, guess what? They never gave up their assets. And so they still have good human access, when it comes to who the deep state is and who's involved where and who's involved with what. So, the days of those 3-letter organizations being the only ones that could have access to the dirt are long gone. Long gone. Because
OSINT is
there you go. Yeah, you've got OSINT, and you've got people like ourselves that got out and created better intel resources and organizations, and are running circles around both the FBI and the CIA. Because
Candace Owens is running circles around the FBI.
Yeah.
What I say is the FBI doesn't solve crimes; it manages crime. The CIA doesn't solve terrorism; it manages terrorism.
And it's interesting too. And I'm not criticizing the organizations per se, because there's a lot of good people that are there trying to do the right thing. But anytime you have people in power in those organizations, on the 7th floor, as we call it, that are compartmenting things, that are leading people astray, that have their own agenda based on the influences of the deep state, that's what you get. You get bad organizations. And like I will tell you right now, I know this for a fact because I was in the discussion that both in the FBI and in the CIA and in NSA, discussions have already been had that they are just going to lay low and wait until 47 finishes out his term. And then they're going to go back into doing what they want to do. And that's all they're doing. They're buying time. And this is why I hope and pray that someone will be able to get to Tulsi. And I know they have. I know these meetings have been had. but I'm hoping that she will be able to listen and realize that if she doesn't start gutting these organizations, if she doesn't start bringing people in her office that know who the deep state players are, she's just fighting an uphill battle. And I got to tell you what, one of my greatest dreams is to paddle out with her and her husband one day in Hawaii. That'd be great, you know, and just have those conversations with her, because I think she rocks. I think she's trying to do the right thing. But I'm telling you, the battle would be a lot less dangerous if she did, you know. And there are people that know who the deep state are and the bad actors. And for 47, look, he's still, I think I mentioned this once before, he is probably one of the most brilliant strategists when it comes to business. I wouldn't want to play chess against him. I'd get whooped. You know, I think he's incredible. And despite what other people think, I like his sense of humor too. And I'm not in his office, and I don't know why and how he makes some decisions he makes. I can just pray that God, you know, keeps him in his good graces and he makes the right decisions on a lot of things. And I've learned this because if you're not in the office, if you're not in the war room, everybody's got an opinion about something. And until you're either there or on the ground, you don't really know what's happening. But he is still surrounded by people that have strong ties to John Brennan and Obama. And these are people that influence him daily. These are gatekeepers. These are people that other people know have those conversations with the deep state. And what I think he's up against is this, and it's a battle he's not trained for. He's up against the world of espionage. He is not, and these are people that overthrow governments and put presidents in and remove presidents.
Yes.
And it is the most dangerous battlefield for any president to be on, because it is full of so much deception. And 47, he is great at probably everything he does. But I'm going to tell you what, and this is with all due respect to the president, he is not trained for this war when it comes to the war of the clandestine service, and guys like Obama and John Brennan and Clapper and Burns and all these people that are still influencing the world, still fighting against the republic, still want this to be a Marxist socialist state, still want us to be part of the one world government, all of this stuff. And so those entities have their agents in place, you know, and we see it unfold when people like Mike Flynn, General Flynn, try to give good advice, which is solid advice that we should trust, and it gets ignored. You know, and so we go, wow, why are they ignoring that? Or do they not believe it? Are they stupid, or whatever it is? And we don't have the answer for that. I think, Jeff, that obviously people have other agendas. And the sad thing about our nation, and it has been historical, is that we get people in power and they think they know what's good for the American people. They think what they believe, they are the keepers of what should be said and what should not be said. So we lack transparency. When Pam Bondi made that statement, and I don't know Pam, and you know, I wouldn't want to be in her shoes. You know, she's got a tough job. But when she made that statement on the Epstein files, it said, look, if we were to release all the names on this file, our government would collapse. That was a scare tactic to the American people to say, you don't want the government to collapse, so you better be okay with us not releasing these names. Or she was true about that. And guess what? Let it collapse. There's other good people that'll step up to the plate. For every 15 senators that you kick out of there and put in prison because they raped children, there's 15 more good ones that'll step up to the plate. And so we have to start cleaning house. And I know there's a lot going on up there, a lot more than I can even imagine, that the president has to deal with. And we sometimes look at him as the guy making all the decisions without looking at the people around him that are forcing him or helping him make those decisions. And
well, his Constellation staff is controlled, I think, by Israel and Mossad. I think FBI, CIA is very much infiltrated. But I did want to go back, because I know you've been You've certainly been at the White House. I haven't been at the White House since 2004 or something. You've been much more recently than I. It seems to me that there's Gabbard and Holman, and then there's Bondi and Patel. It seems like there's a division in there of, patriots and, pundits. Do you see that way, or how do you see it?
Yeah, I probably have to just be clear. I don't spend that much time at the White House, Jeff. A lot of people do think I'm up there a lot. I'm around that atmosphere a bit. I am a couple of people removed from 47 through good friends like Mike Flynn and other people that I know that, do have conversations with the president. They're good filtration systems so that I can, cut through all the bad media and know what's really true and what's not true, so to speak. But there's going to always be some division between departments. It's not none of those jobs are easy to handle. And oftentimes people's decisions are constantly going to be questioned. So the strategies that Cash puts in place are not probably going to be the same that maybe Bondi would put in place or wants to put in place, or that Trump would, or that Pete would at the Department of War. They've all got a lane to stay in. And I think what happens is when those lanes kind of cross over a little bit, people get a little upset, and they're trying to work it all out. One thing I do know about Washington, and I can say this because I've experienced it there. Unlike most of the American people, most of the people in Washington are willing to compromise and negotiate and even lie if it serves their purpose. On the Hill, in Congress, and people that I know that are senators, there's very few that do not compromise one way or the other. They're always talking about, up here on the Hill, we have to give and take a little bit if we're going to get legislation to pass. I'm not like that. I've never been like that. I'm a Marine. I don't have to give and take anything. What's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. So, but when you get in Washington and it wears on you for a while, and then people start leveraging things on you or whatever it may be, we see that it hasn't changed. Well, in my lifetime, it hasn't changed in 40 some years since I've been around that kind of political community, which is why I probably would never make a good politician, nor do I care to be one. I'm just a warfighter in the trenches, saving kids for 34 years and a good patriot that loves the Republic. And I believe in the Constitution. I think that what I see, and in some cases, what we know, that people in Washington are owned by other people. They owe people favors, and it's not a position I want to be in. I got asked to run for the governor of Colorado 3 different times by lobby groups out of Washington. And all three times I asked myself, how does this help me save a kid? And many of them said, well, you could get the law changed and you can get this and this and this done. And that's not true. That's not true. And I said, I'm not a politician. They said, we don't need politicians. We need leadership. And I do agree with that. And that's why I encourage veterans, people like yourself and other people that have the time to get involved in the leadership positions of government, not the political positions of government, and get in there and do the job. But it's one of the reasons why I'm not a guy who compromises, and I don't want to put myself in that position, because people that are in those positions of authority will eventually, to some degree, if they're not careful, they will get compromised, whether they know it or not. People will, so they can control them, kind of like what the deep state is really good at.
Well, I think the difference is the authenticity of your personal revelation has kept you aligned all of these years. I mean, if you don't have that moral core, there's no virtuous populace, there's no republic. And I think that's the difference. Got a lot of questions about CPS, and I know you've been very outspoken of the corruption of the foster care system and CPS. And I myself, coming out of an orphanage, really was super blessed to end up with a great family and not end up, as so many have. But could you comment on your positions of what you've experienced with CPS and foster care, how they're really part of the corrupt system as well?
Yeah, it's been my personal experience over the years that parts of CPS, not all of CPS, but mostly individuals in CPS have been involved in um, child sex trafficking and profiting from that. Um, I think it's easy for the American public to understand why that would happen because, as you know, CPS is autonomous. They don't answer to anybody, and that's dangerous right there. So, what we have is we have, let's say, for example, the mom of three kids, and she's just barely making it in life, and you want to traffic their kids. So somebody brings charges up against her, which are false, that she's beating her kids, and it's not true. And she ends up in court, and CPS is there, and CPS says, "We, Judge, Your Honor, we don't believe she's fit. Look at all the evidence that we have here at CPS. Her children need to be taken away from her." And the judge sides with CPS. The three children get taken away. And where do they go? Most people don't know. But on some of the cases we worked, they went in the hands of traffickers and were trafficked and profited. And there are many kids that were not as fortunate as you, that we cannot even find. And guess what else? CPS isn't even being held accountable for the children they can't find, that they basically brought into the court system and had taken away from their parents. Now, are there some parents that are bad parents and their kids should be protected? Of course there are. But more and more over the course of time, we're hearing story after story from very credible people about what took place at CPS. And it is an organization that needs to be investigated. But I don't think the FBI is going to investigate it, to be honest with you. I think they make too much money. I think they influence too many people. And I think it is a program that was put in place with maybe not with the intention of trafficking children, but certainly after it was put in place, people saw, wow, we could take advantage of this, which is generally how it happens. Something generally starts out really good and people have good intentions. And then the evil side of the world goes, wow, look at what we could do with that, and then they get their hands on it. And over the course of time, people aren't watching, but no one's listening to the stories of the children or the adults that had their children taken away. And so CPS is not my favorite organization. I will tell you that people like Mary Flynn O'Neill, which is General Flynn's sister, who has America's Future, Little Flowers, she has a robust blueprint for privatizing child care in America with oversight that we don't see at CPS. And so if the president were to say, boss, revamp the CPS system, that's exactly what I would do. I would go to Mary Flynn O'Neill and go, let's look at that blueprint you have. Let's get these private facilities started all across America with the oversight to make sure no children will ever be trafficked. And in addition to that, we're going to change the court system where there's just going to be a court system for just specifically that, child sex trafficking, or just not like the family court thing, but specifically crimes against children. And so we have people with solutions. It's just they're getting through and navigating the fault lines past people and gatekeepers that currently profit from CPS. It's challenging. It's really challenging.
That's great to hear. I used to hang out with General Flynn all the time. We're friends from the Reawaken tours with Clay Clark. But I'm also fascinated because I have Native background with you. You went to the Lakota reservations and you were seeing how a lot of the ladies were saying how a lot of the men are involved in that. I thought that was very truthful, not politically correct to bring up as well.
Yeah, we did. We took a fight child sex trafficking course up to the res, and we got a chance to be enlightened by a number of women from the reservation on a number on a number of fronts. Number one, at that time, I think it was a couple of years ago, we did that course. The ladies told us 1,200 indigenous girls were missing off one of the reservations there. And it was like, what does missing mean? And they informed us that MS-13 was working on the res, and that they were in business deals with some of the men on the res, and that people were looking the other way. And it would make sense because indigenous women, they can look Asian, they can look Indonesian, they can look Native American, some can even look Asian, Chinese or whatever it may be. So, there's a market for them there. And if you look at the fact that, and I've got a lot of Native friends, and my grandmother's Waccamaw. So I think I can speak boldly to this, especially after having conversations with my friends like John Proudstar off the Yaqui res, and other people around the country, in different tribes. It is shameful what our nation did to the Native Americans in history, and we can't fix that right now. The treaties that were broken. But with that said, it is also shameful within our tribal communities of what we are doing to our own children with alcohols and drugs, and not honoring our ancestors by the way we live our lives, and taking care of them, and not letting our children be raped, and not letting them be taken off the res. Where are the men on the res? And according to most of the women, when I asked that question, they said most of our men are alcoholics or drug addicts. That's it, and they're lazy. And so when the women on many of the reservations want to stand up, they're quickly oppressed by the tribal council or the men that are running the res. And not every reservation is a great reservation. I get that. But if I want to encourage our Native Americans to not live as victims any longer, and have enough pride in their tribes and their community to say that none of our children will be harmed on our watch, to make our Native Americans, our children of the Native tribes, as special as they should be. Because we hear this a lot. We hear from our Native brothers and sisters, about how special we are as a people. We were the first here in this country. And so if you honestly believe that, and if you believe that you are the gift God put here in this nation to be the first footprint on the land, then you need to act that way. And you need to take some pride, and you need to start saving your own children and showing the rest of the world here that we're not going to let what's happening in every big city among white people or Black people or Asian people in America. We're not going to let that happen with indigenous tribal people. We're not going to let that happen. So we left there feeling pretty good about having that conversation. But to be very honest with you, as I monitor the res and many different reservations, it hasn't changed much, to be honest with you. It just hasn't shifted.
Yeah, Russell Beans, was working with a tribe and said, just get off the BIA dole, forget it, because the government's never going to let you get ahead. As long as you are dependent upon the government, you're never going to make it. We don't need them originally. We could do it, and they were afraid to do it. And I think that's your success, my success. We cut our teeth and learned our stuff with the G, but then we left the G because we see the limitations of it. I think is really crucial.
I think we love our country, but what we despise so much is bureaucracy, and that's the tail end of good government, to be honest with you. And that's where most of the corruption takes place. We love the Republic. We believe that the government that our founding fathers established was good and is good to a certain degree when it functions properly, but it's not functioning properly. And that in itself is another battle that people like the president and Congress and other people have to fight. And, having coffee and private conversations with different senators who I do trust and are doing a good job, they shake their head and they go, man, if I'd have known what I was going to be in for before I got up here, and the only reason I'm staying in office is because the people of my state believe in me and they're depending on me. And that's why I'm here. If I weren't in this position right now, I'd be back home retired, because it's just not worth it. Because we have so many, and I won't even use the term that they use, but basically so much evil up here and so many people not to be trusted that, you lose sight of a good nation if you don't really believe in the Constitution and if you don't uphold it and keep your faith in God. And that's really it. Mostly keeping their faith in God, because the nation is run by God. I believe this nation was influenced and founded by God. I'm grateful for that. And I believe when we stray away from God, our nation suffers. But at the end of the day, whether it's this nation or another nation, God owns the entire universe, and He's who we answer to. And we should be grateful every day that we have a constitution and that we have an America and the freedom of what we have, our Second Amendment rights and our freedom of speech. And we should be smart enough to study history and look around us and see what's happening in other places that will take that freedom away from you. When we watch the Muslim invasion, and people, before I start this, because people are going to go, oh my gosh, you can't talk about Muslims. Yeah, I can. My granddad was a Muslim who converted to Christianity when he came here to America. So I can talk about Muslims. And my grandfather said, Islam is the socialism of religion. It is no different than Marxism. That's what my grandfather, a former Muslim, told me. And so when we saw the Muslim invasion of Europe, look at all the problems they had. And then we saw it in our border here, all the Muslims that came across here. Muslims do not want to assimilate into any country. They want to conquer, and they talk about it all the time. Now, here's where we miss the boat. We don't believe them. I'm going to tell you something, and you know this, Jeff. I've fought in the Middle East before. I've been around a lot of Muslims. When they say they're going to do something, they do it. They absolutely will do it, and they believe it with all their heart. So are we looking at another crusade in the modern days here on our own soil? We could. Is President Trump doing something about it? It's a good question. I don't know. I'm sure he's making those calls. Texas is doing something about it. We know that. But I don't think they were doing anything about it until Governor Abbott was forced to do something about it because the people spoke up in the state of Texas. So here we have a battle on our forefront that we've got to pay attention to as well when it comes to that, on top of the drugs and the terrorists and the illegal immigration. I think we still have 11 million illegal immigrants here that we haven't found. So, and I know it's interesting. I know, and we all know now, that part of that plan was for the Democrats to be able to get illegal voting so the socialist Marxist system could stay in place here. That's reality, and then anybody that questions that are generally the same people that are questioning the fact that when we came up and said the COVID vaccine is going to kill you and this is what it does, and they're like, oh, that's conspiracy. And guess what? It's not such a conspiracy anymore, is it? And people have died from it. And now people are going, no more mRNA, no more COVID vaccines. It's killing people. People like Pete Chambers, Doc Chambers, you might know Pete.
I do.
Pete was a great whistleblower for that. He just ran for governor there in Texas. Didn't work out, but maybe next time it will. But so when people try to challenge us and go, oh, you're just a bunch of conspiracy theorists. No, we're not. We don't say anything unless it's the fact. And the facts are there are 11 million here that if President Trump had not signed that executive order in yesterday or the day before, can't remember, on no mail-in ballots and voter IDs and all that kind of stuff, man, we'd be right back. We'd be right back where we were with the Biden administration.
Well, I certainly agree with you that Islamification of America is a problem. I think the Zionization of America is an even bigger problem. But since we've moved on to international issues, and you're an old-time intel officer like me, any comments upon, I don't know if you heard the beginning of my cast where I was talking about what the president was saying last night, because I'm definitely against an Iraq ground invasion, and I'm hopeful that won't happen. Do you have any thoughts on where you see that going, or anything you'd like to say before we wrap up on that?
Yeah, you know what? I'm not in the meetings with the Secretary of War or Trump, and so and I don't have access to all the intel that they may have had intel to in order to make these decisions for or against. I'm certainly not a big warmonger, but there is a time where all of a sudden your promises get shifted a little bit because now you have an active threat or something like that. Um, if I were to speculate, and this is just speculation, I do know that the president loves the country, and his thinking could very well be in line with this. I've got to get rid of all the evil I can against America by the end of my term. That includes Venezuela. That includes Iran. That may include somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. Because when I leave here, no other president is going to tackle this. We've seen that in the past. This issue with Iran, of course, should have been taken care of a long time ago, but it hasn't. Now, I go all the way back dealing with Iran back to my CIA days. And I will tell everybody this, they have always been a threat. They have always sponsored terrorism. And so the question I have is, when was enough enough? So if I'm thinking based on my experience of when is enough enough, and I look at protecting our country from a national security standpoint, it doesn't surprise me that 47 or the Department of War made this call. They may have made this call because things were escalating that we didn't see. For example, let's ask the questions. Why did Obama and why did Hillary Clinton aid Iran in the development of that? That's treasonous. That's treason. Nobody's ever accounted for what was the boat? What was the plane load? Was it $500 million? That
$500 million, yeah, cash.
500 million. Has Obama been held accountable for that? No, not yet. So if I look at all the people like Clinton and Obama and the deep staters that have always been trying to crush what Trump is wanting to do for the American people or for the nation, I would have to, if I were to put them side by side, I'd have to say I'm okay with what everything Trump is doing right now versus I'm not okay with what everybody was trying to do to destroy our country. So now, does that make me feel that this will escalate or won't escalate? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. I'm not on the drawing board with a lot of the military commanders, but I will say this: we do have enough military commanders in the Department of the War that if they did not think that this was the right thing to do, they would have been advising the president differently and advising Pete differently. So it makes me think that we're at a point where enough is enough. Now, did Israel influence some things? I don't know. Is Israel as a nation and as a government one of my favorite players? Not always. Do I like the Israel that the Bible speaks of? I love it. You know, God's chosen people. I love that. But politically and their bureaucracy, do I agree with what they've done? And do I know for a fact that Mossad has done some pretty nasty things? I absolutely do. You know, I do that from my intelligence committee. Is Israel still considered by the CIA as a hostile intelligence force? They were at one time, and they should be. Okay, even though they're friendly, doesn't mean that their intelligence apparatus doesn't work against the United States.
Oh, it definitely does. Definitely does.
What's that, Jeff?
It definitely does.
Well, it can work. I've seen it work for and against, you know, and those relationships. So I only put our trust, and I don't even put our trust in the CIA now, but I used to put our trust in the CIA, everything that's on our soil. So a lot of deals can be made with long-term strategies. But this I will say, I have friends in Tehran, if I'm talking from a humanitarian standpoint, and those people have lived under a regime that is just horrible. It is the worst you could think about, and they can't get their voice out. Many, like some of the people under China's, and you know, they live horrible lives as well. So do I feel for those people, and do I know that their cry is being heard right now? Yes, it is. Do I know that there was a nuclear threat, and there always has been? Yes, there was, and yes, there is. Do I know that their state-sponsored terrorists? Yes, absolutely. We've caught them red-handed at that over and over and over. So if in fact we can get in and do the job and set the standard for the rest of the world, including what Trump said the other night about the NATO. Look, if you don't get on board, guess what? We're just going to leave NATO. I don't blame him a bit. The US has been doing the heavy lifting. You know, they want us to protect Europe, but they don't want to help us with other things. So this is a whole different dynamic there as well. So I'm not approving of war. Excuse me. And I don't approve of loss of life, but I will say this. As a former counterterrorism officer, I watched 9/11 happen and it didn't have to happen. I was a negotiator on the Pan Am 73 in Karachi. That didn't have to happen. Every terrorist event didn't happen to happen. Even the 25 to 28 Taliban terrorists that came across the Mexican border 6 months ago that we kept telling everybody about, that didn't have to happen, but they're here now. All right. A lot of things that have happened when it came to the destruction of our interest or the US did not have to happen if we had nipped it at the bud right away. But because of political agendas, excuse me, biases, money, leveraging, whatever it may be, we have suffered in our American society because we didn't take it under control. We have yet to fight the battle on our own soul with what Biden left open at the border. That's going to happen here. We're going to see it. And the American public, I predict, are not even prepared for that. Our law enforcement are not prepared for that. One police station will not be able to defend itself against 12 Taliban fighters. Police station doesn't have RPGs. It doesn't have IEDs. It doesn't have all the war tools, but they do. And they're here in America now. So the timing of all of this is very interesting. And I think maybe 47 even knows, based on good assessment, internal assessment, that we may be having things happen here in America and they may get activated sooner rather than later. And that this was a necessary deployment, to be honest with you. Again, let me make it clear, I'm not in favor of war, but I am in favor of protecting our national security. And undeniably, whether we like it or not, people in Iran have been slaughtered under a regime. And also that same regime has sponsored the same terrorists that have killed Americans and other people all around the world. And so the answer, and we have negotiated over and over and over. And we've been nice over all the years saying, please stop. But here's what most of the world doesn't understand. We're not fighting just against Iran. We're fighting against deep state influencers that support Iran, whether it's Klaus Schwab or George Soros or Obama or Brennan or Clapper. All of these people are deep staters, and they behind the scenes are turning the dials to a certain degree so that we look bad, we look good, whatever it may be. And I think that those people have to be eliminated before the world will come to some resolution as to how much we're willing to tolerate. Frankly, between you and I, Jeff, I'm not willing to tolerate Iran. I'm not willing to tolerate them launching a nuclear weapon. If it was something that was made up, it would be one thing. For example, when we went in Iraq, there was a dispute whether there were nuclear weapons there or not. And the CIA sent teams in, and guess what? They didn't find anything. Okay. So we came back and we said, why did we get to that war? We got in there because, you remember George Bush Sr.? Remember when Saddam sent over the assassin teams to Mexico? That was a revenge war. That's what that was right there. Yeah. That was a war for oil, and we know that. This war, the evidence is there. They have nuclear capability. They have literally threatened to destroy the United States. I don't take that lightly. And I think we would be foolish. And I think the president would not be doing his job to protect the American people if we didn't stop that threat, to be honest with you. So that's kind of where I am right now with it. I push aside Israel getting us in there. Whether Israel got us in there or not, there would still be a threat against us here in the United States, only because out of their own mouth, they have said, we will destroy the United States. And for that, they have become our enemy.
Okay, well, we will disagree on those points, but I
Of
certainly
course.
respect your point of view and very much respect all of your work, especially your personal revelation and the authenticity and sincerity and integrity that you've kept throughout all these years of your work. And I want to thank you so much for coming on. I'd like to invite you back in the future for future talks, and wish you a wonderful Resurrection Day Easter.
You too, Brian. Jeff. God bless you, man, and thanks for having me on here. I look forward to it, and you make sure you take good care of yourself. And thank you for your service, brother. Okay.
Right back at you, brother. Thank you so
All right.
much. God bless.
Out here.
Out here. Okay, well, that was a fabulous interview, I think, with BAZZLE Baz. Very intelligent, very accomplished military officer, intelligence officer, child rescuer. We disagree on some things, but that's okay. I'll give you some of that. Says, great guest. And I think the issue is, does the military intervention solve the problem? And the answer is no, because it's an economic problem. And this is showing the limits of American empire power. But breaking story here, while I was on, I'm getting multiple reports that President Trump has actually fired Pam Bondi. And I think it's Blanche in charge now. I don't think that's much of a difference. I think she should have been fired a long time ago. But if that is the case, that's what I'm being told while I'm live on the air, that President Trump has fired Pam Bondi. But I don't think there's any real change. I don't see any indictments coming. But I also want to mention another email. I get many, but again, the ones from my peers or near peers are special. And this is from a near peer. Good podcast. You pointed out Iran sponsors terrorists, but you didn't mention in the same sentence that Israel is the definition of a terrorist nation. There are indicators that every player involved supports different terrorist groups at different times. So the Gulf War is a pissing contest between terrorist organizations, just that Israel is the worst terrorist group. So I will make it clear then, yeah, Israel has done a lot of state-sponsored terrorism, maybe the most terrorist nation in the world. That doesn't mean that Iran's good guys either. So making that clear. Oh, Nazadal says, not Blanche, Lee Zeldin, interim DOJ. I don't know Lee Zeldin. I know Blanche. I can't remember what he did, but it was something that he didn't do much of. Then wrapping up, watch out for the new White House app. The White House app wants your precise GPS location, your biometric fingerprint access. I would not download that app. It's getting full network access, runs at startups, prevents your phone from going to sleep. So I would not go ahead and get that app. And then finally, wrapping up, probably most importantly, today is Holy Thursday, the day the Passion of the Christ begins. The Majors movie for this weekend, of course, is The Passion. I'm actually going to have my daughter start watching it in sections. After washing the feet of his disciples and offering his own body and blood at the Last Supper, at Pesach, Passover, Christ retreats to the Garden of Gethsemane, knows what's coming, the scourging, the thorns, the agonizing way to the cross, the birth of every sin in human history. And that's the great scene opening in The Passion, where the evil one is saying, no, you can't take in all of the sins of the world. And this is where Yeshua actually sweats blood. That is actually a physical phenomena that happens. And he asks his disciples to stay awake with him for an hour, but they can't. But finally, he says, not my will, but yours be done. And he accepts the cup. So wishing you and inviting you to join me on Sunday at christchaplaincy.com live, 9 a.m. Arizona time, where I will be leading the Sunday Pascha service, not Easter. Easter is Estre, pagan goddess. That's what the hares, the rabbits, the eggs are about. But the Pascha celebration of the resurrection, christchaplaincy.com. Love to have you. Love to see you then. And if I don't see you then, have a blessed Holy Week and Resurrection Day. Remember, freedom is never given. It is earned, fought for, won, and taken. So take it.